Welcome to Resolving Reality, an independent Irish media platform. In this 5th video episode, I interview David Whitehead from the Unslaved podcast. Visit David's website, unslaved.com, for his many interviews and collaborations with Irish author and researcher Michael Disraeli. Support independent media by supporting Resolving Reality. Don't forget to like, comment and share this video, and make sure you subscribe. To check out all of the Resolving Reality audio and video content and all of our social media platforms, visit our website, resolvingreality.com. Okay, David, welcome to Resolving Reality, and good to speak to you.
Emmett, great to speak to you again, my friend. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Cool, no worries. Yeah, it's so good to speak to you as well. So recently, after the Unslaved chat we had, like we were talking about, it's a great buzz, you know, to just riff about things. And I do cover quite a lot of different topics, so it was nice to just riff and about issues, but also get philosophical as well, which is really nice. And you know, for the viewers, of course, who don't really know the brand, how about we start with Unslaved, and just kind of, for anyone who doesn't know about it or know what it's about, just tell us what Unslaved is.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, Unslaved. People ask me all the time, what's the podcast about? What kind of content do you cover? Give us your elevator pitch. And I got to say, it's the hardest elevator pitch to give in the world, in my opinion, for anything I've done, because of the eclectic nature of the show. I, of course, work with the legendary Michael Disraeli. He grew up in your neck of the woods, actually, in Belfast, Ireland, and now he travels all over. He's been traveling lately all over Europe, collecting information on some of the information or some of those topics that he wants to cover. And we've got some ideas for some upcoming documentaries and some episodes, and he's writing books and articles constantly about, I mean, basically everything you're not being told in the mainstream. And there's so many subjects we cover, and we'll get into some of those subjects, but the idea of Unslaved, we based it loosely off of the show The Prisoner. This was the popular British television show that came out, I believe, what was it, in the 60s or 70s? And it was covering the idea of the individual versus the collective, you know, the tyranny of the masses, you know, how, you know, basically you got these small elite ruling classes that are able to get a collective trance going in their society to basically out anybody that is considered an outsider or anybody that is called unmutual. So unmutual was one of the terms that was used in that show. And then one of Michael's favorite bands was a band called Enslaved. It was a metal band. So he built this term Unslaved, and he got the URL back in the day. And it was just a basic site for posting information on that subject. And then we used that as the template for the podcast. And my history with Michael is that I discovered his work back in 2007. I came across some interviews with him online, and then I looked him up and I found his Origins and Oracles series, which if anybody has not looked at that series at all, you have to come to our website, unslaved.com, and check that series out. I think the total production was like over 40 hours of material. A very, very detailed, source-rich, documented material on a variety of subjects, from human origins, ancient mystery school traditions, the occult, religion and mythology, like comparative religion and mythology, geopolitics, all of that kind of stuff. And Michael basically did a whole presentation on each of those subjects, and then has evolved and continued to grow his research in all of those different areas. So he had multiple websites going. He still has a bunch of websites up, but I was trying to find a way to basically bring his information out to a wider audience and communicate it to people in a way where they could understand. Because if anybody's listened to Michael before, it's very advanced research. He's, it's not for the average person. I'll tell you that right now. And so how do you condense all those amazing ideas and all that brilliant information and give it in a way that you can articulate it to an average person to help, inspire people to look into these subjects and to educate themselves about them. And him and I had gotten together and done a whole bunch of interviews. We just recorded some interviews on Skype. I threw them up on YouTube, and we had a really good rapport and a really good, there was just something about him and I when we would get together that we would just have a really good conversation, and we got feedback on that. It really helped sort of explain these subjects to people. And I'm like, well, we need to have a platform where we can do this justice. We need to have high quality production. We need a great website. We need to create a website that would be informative and that would help people if they were curious about these subjects that we cover, and give them all the sources that they need. So it's not just two guys talking. Like every episode that we post on Unslaved has scores of research and reference links at the bottom. And we always interplay different episodes and say, hey, we recommend you listen to this episode as well, or read this article, or check out this book. So this podcast is for serious investigators into philosophy, history, the roots of religion, the roots of culture, the roots of the way the political systems have changed and evolved and grew throughout history, looking into some of the conspiratorial elements of history like secret societies, their influence on world affairs, looking at some of the current events like what's happening, and we're going to discuss some of them today, what's going on in especially Western nations, this whole hoopla about the politically correct agenda and the UN mandates and all these different things. So we take these very popular subjects and we look at them through a philosophical lens as well as a scientific, more academic lens. And we basically focus in on the individual. So the whole point of Unslaved is are you as an individual in society, do you own your mind? Do you own the right to your life? Do you own do you have any control over your own individual autonomy? Or are you basically a sacrificial animal that is to be sacrificed on the altar of the collective? Do you own your life, or does the people around you own your life? And this has been a philosophical debate that goes back to the beginning of philosophy. And so Michael's work is very much rooted in the idea of what he calls selfhood, which could just be compared to, walking the Siddhartha road in certain religious connotations, or, trying to find a road towards psychological independence and freedom, understanding the value of freedom, understanding that freedom itself is the base upon which every human being is founded, and that there's a great tradition, especially in Western countries, for preserving the individual and actually uplifting the individual. Because if you have an empowered individual and you have every unit in your society that is thinking like that and working like that, then you have better cohesion in the community and in the group. Whereas the way that politics and philosophy started to get pushed towards, and we can get into who did it and why, it's more about the idea of collectivism as a political philosophy. And this is essentially what was espoused in the Soviet Union and has been done even in Nazi Germany, and so many different experiments that have been run on this. And so we're trying to help educate people about the other side, because in school, in the media, in pop culture, there's really only one narrative that's being pushed subliminally and even overtly. And that is that we need to work towards the greater good for the greater number. That you owe something to society. You owe something to this collective. And they don't want independent thought. They don't want critical thought. What they want to teach is something called critical theory, which comes out of the Frankfurt School and so many different, the Tavistock Institute. And so we reference some of these organizations and then bring that back to, okay, let's compare their philosophy and what they're trying to sell you with some of the most brilliant minds and traditions that come from the ancient times all the way up to the present. And we name names of researchers and philosophers and thinkers and scholars, of people that nobody's ever heard of, but who were very eminent, who were very brilliant, who were able to articulate their position extremely well to have another point of view. So on the Unslaved podcast, we're basically just presenting information that has been hidden. It's the esoteric side of the story that is kind of like the subtext that nobody got. And I find that we do a really great job. I'm very proud of it. And it helps people open their minds to look at things in a different way. And we're not trying to convert anybody. We're not trying to say, agree with all the points we're making, or, follow us. We have all the truth. Michael and I are on a sincere pursuit of knowledge and truth, and we're taking an approach of investigative reporting. So we're saying, all right, we're investigating the nature of being, the big questions of who we are, why we're here, where we're going, as well as all these other ancillary subjects that feed into that. And from that, we're hoping to inspire each individual that listens to think for themselves, to have a greater understanding of their inner world and also the external world, and how that interrelates. so that they can hopefully navigate this chaotic time in which we find ourselves. So that's probably the shortest boiled down elevator pitch I could give. The rest of it would have to be discovered by somebody that would want to come over and check out. We have, we're coming up. We just did our 117th episode, and we've got hours upon hours upon hours of premium content, presentations. Michael does a premium show on there where he's doing a series right now on idealism. He talks about certain thinkers and philosophers, and he'll do a whole series on what their ideas really were and compare them to other ideas. So it's really a very, very unique. It's a product, really. It's a unique educational platform, and that's what I've always wanted it to be. And we're actually just getting started because we're about to launch our new site. We're going to be launching courses. We're going to be integrating a private social media plugin platform just for our members who are sick of censored off of Facebook and all this kind of stuff, who want to have a private area where they can share information with like-minded people without being censored. We're calling that program Unfaced, as sort of like a joke to Facebook.
Oh yeah, that's good.
We got some other cool things that are in the pipeline. So check it out. The website is unslaved.com.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I think you're really hitting the marks that you've set for yourself, and it is quite a task. And I've been talking about this. Well, one of the first things I did with Resolving Reality was to set up the website, which didn't even seem like it was needed in the beginning. But because of the world we live in, you have to diversify, and you can't base everything on YouTube. I mean, did you start out in the beginning with that intention to make it like the private kind of based website, or were you forced to go down that road because of censorship?
Yeah, it would be the latter. I originally started my own channel. I have sort of my own website and show that I call Way of the Truth Warrior. And it's sort of been an ongoing blog that I've been doing since probably about 2007 of my own spiritual journey and personal journey and navigating through all these different subjects. And when I started working with Michael, we set it up on YouTube, iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, all that kind of stuff. We had hundreds of thousands of downloads. We had probably every episode would get anywhere from, it would fluctuate anywhere from like 10,000 views to about 50 to 60,000 views. We were doing really well. Our channel was, it was growing. I mean, we were close to 30,000 subscribers on YouTube. And then all of a sudden we started getting hits on our videos. They were demonetizing our videos. And at first I was like, okay, demonetization, whatever, as long as you don't censor us, right? And we had set it up where we did a subscription-based website so that we could fund our operation and keep things going. And also we feel we have content that is of value to people, and we believe in a fair exchange of value for value. So we did, okay, we'll do a free hour and then we'll do a paid hour for people who are really serious. And the free hour was what went out on YouTube and iTunes and everything else. And then we started getting more harassment, more censorship. We started getting, all kinds of attacks from different angles. And it was just shocking to us that here we are, we're not saying anything. It's controversial because every subject today is controversial thanks to the whole PC police that are existing in all these forums and throughout all these social media organizations. But at the beginning, I said, well, let's just put up with it until we can build something that, if we want, we can pull it off. And then it just got so egregious, and so many people, they took down Alex Jones. They started censoring people like Stefan Molyneux and, on and on. And then it was people that weren't even talking openly about some of these controversial subjects. And it was just getting so incredible. And we started to see a bias in the way that some of these organizations were censoring information. And of course, we've been studying the documents and the admittances of these people throughout probably over the last 100 years about how there's been this propaganda campaign, how they want to insinuate these ideas into the public and force the conversation. And we knew that was coming, but when you experience it yourself, there's nothing like that to really crystallize it. Because I believe, we started doing a series on Islam, the nature of Islam, and talking to Islamic scholars and referencing people that, grew up in those areas, and journalists in the Middle East, and people that came back from going over there and fighting in the wars. And we started collating all that information and saying, hey, be careful with this mass migration stuff that's happening, because there's more to it than what they're presenting to you. This is not about saving people. This is not about helping these poor migrants. This is not what that's about. That's the sales pitch. There's something bigger here. And we started talking about it. We weren't even making any declarative statements on anything. And I believe, this is just a theory because they didn't tell us what it was that got our channel pinged and videos started getting taken down. They didn't say what it was. They just say, you violated our terms of service. And it's like, well, explain that. We're just talking about subjects. We're not calling for violence. We're not out there, like if you've watched our show, you've been on our show, we're not there to try to force anybody to think like us. We're not racist, bigots, crazy. But the way that it rolls out is that, even if you talk about it, you are this, and this, and therefore our AI bot algorithms are going to seek out your channel and start smashing your channel. And really, there's nothing you can do about it because there's nobody you can complain to. So we just said, you know what? Screw this. We don't want to. Unslaved is too sacred. The work that we're doing is too important to us. We love the work that we do. We're passionate about the work that we do, and we're not trying to recruit people. We just want to have a platform to share it with people that are interested in the stuff that we're interested in, just like you or just like any show. And it's all fine and good for, Bill Maher to get up there and say his bit on national television, or these CNN reporters to lie openly on a daily basis, to actually lie to the American population, or in Canada, all these celebrities can get up and call for the death of children. Like what happened with some of those instances. You had actual celebrities saying, those boys that were out there with their MAGA hats, they should be thrown into a wood chipper and all this kind of stuff. That's all good. But the minute you're sitting on an academic level trying to analyze these very important and very, I would say, very complicated subjects, you're trying to figure out the truth about it. Oh, we don't want that. We don't want those videos. All of a sudden, our videos started getting like 2,000 views and 1,000 views. And then but it was just incredible what was happening. So I said, forget this. Let's make our own platform. And there was obviously some learning curves and some kinks we were working out in the beginning just on the software side. But it's been an amazing process, actually, because since we came off YouTube, because I know everybody's like, that's a big risk to just pull the channel down. We said, forget it. We closed it down. Since we did it, our membership grew. And we've created a space on Unslaved where you can still, coming up with the new website, you'll still be able to watch the first hour for free. There'll be tons of free content there, but it's all in-house. It's all on our site. It's protected to the very best that we can. The only stage that they'd have to get to in order to censor us at this point would be to actually have complete and total control of all areas of the internet, which they want, but they haven't quite achieved just yet. So, I'm not against somebody having YouTube channels or anything like that. My other channel, my Truth Warrior channel, I still have it on YouTube. It hasn't been censored yet. I keep it a little more PG. I focus on more like personal development stuff and those kind of subjects. But for Unslaved, we said, you know what? Forget it. We're putting this behind a secure domain, and we just want to have the people there that are serious about it. They don't have to agree with us on everything, but at least they're serious, they're respectful, and they love the content. So, yeah, that's how it went.
Yeah, I was thinking as well about this because before I knew I was going to speak to you about that very issue. I find it very interesting that you did go private with the website, and it is a great idea. I kind of thought with the way nothing happens by accident. And those of us who are switched on to the game that's being played in the world knows that things like Google and YouTube having that sort of dominance over an area doesn't happen by accident. And YouTube is the most common platform in the world. And I kind of thought, I wonder if they were deliberately doing it that way, making it the top one to suck in all the creators, suck in all the content, and then start to dictate their little little totalitarian agenda in the long term when everyone's kind of dependent on it,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It seems to be, I don't know what other conclusion we could draw at this point. I mean, if anybody watched the recent Joe Rogan podcast where he was interviewing Jack Dorsey for a second time and the lawyer, the legal assistant that he had, and they had Tim Pool on there, and it was really going after them. And basically, if you watch that podcast start to finish, they deny it all the way through and then admit it all the way through at the same time. If you really watch it, like it's incredible. So they are, we know that there's at the very minimum, there's a bias against any kind of conservative or libertarian or independent type commentary. Anything that is even remotely going to cause harm and violence to somebody by sharing an opinion, because that's what it is today. Words are actual physical violence now. Then, they take it down and they're like, well, we got to work on it, and we got to we got to keep learning, and we're always trying to learn. And they just have this really soft, like, oh, we're just trying to do our best. And it's very complicated. And we have so many users and all these different tweets and things like that. And this is just Twitter. I mean, get into Zuckerberg with Facebook and look at YouTube and all that. But just looking at Twitter, it was such an eye opener. And we're learning more and more and more about this. And when they got to the point in the interview about why they censored Alex Jones, I remember you just see Joe Rogan laughing because he's like, really? That's what it was that got him kicked off? Like, that's what it was? That didn't lead to violence. That was like, the context wasn't there. Meanwhile, for the rest of the show, Dorsey and his little minion were saying, it's all about context. It's like, yeah, it's about context. And you're not taking context into consideration. So you either get to the point with this stuff where you think, are these people just like, they're not educated, they're not intelligent, or is there an actual agenda and they're just trying to not admit it publicly, right? Even though it's obvious to everybody the great thing about these social platforms is everybody's watching it now. Like, the more they do this stuff, the more people are going to look out for it. So they're kind of putting themselves into an interesting corner. The joke is on them, those people that are out there trying to censor these conversations from happening, because they're the worst advertisement for themselves. So I say, and Michael said this many times as well, like, hey, let them keep falling on their own sword. The more they keep acting the way they're acting, and by that I mean the regressive left and the whole globalist infrastructure and the media and all that kind of stuff, the more they keep acting the way they're acting, the more they're actually doing a disservice to their own cause, because the lies are becoming obvious, the chicanery and the corruption is becoming obvious, and more people are starting to open their minds up. Because I'm sorry, in today's age, there's no excuse for ignorance. You now have access to information at your fingertips that your parents didn't have access to, your grandparents, etc. So if anybody's uninformed about what's going on, the onus now is on them. And I say that if you want to come to the table of debate and discussion, you have to at least brush up on these subjects and get informed about it. You don't have to agree, but at least get informed about it before, commenting and trying to go out and shadow ban people and shut people down. There's a whole picture here that hopefully we can help unravel a little bit today in the rest of this podcast for people, that I think is going to help at least educate people about why this is happening, the fact that there's an origin to this, the fact there's a bigger agenda going on, and it's been going on for a long time, and people have been coming out and talking about this for years and years and years, and everything that they said was going to happen is now actually happening in front of us. So I'm not that concerned if that would be the next question. Am I really concerned about it? To be honest, the way it's going, it seems scary. It seems unstoppable. It seems like there's too much control and the average person can't win over this. But to be honest, just wait it out. These people are starving themselves to death. And I think that we're on the precipice of seeing this whole thing come down.
Speaking of that stuff, well, actually, this is how my brain works, right? I can see the swords in the background, the katana swords, right? And we said we were going to talk about your martial arts background, and it is relevant to, what you were talking about, what's going on in the world. I kind of pointed it out quite dramatically in the interview that we did on Unslaved, that this is kind of a war that we're in. Not maybe in a traditional sense, but it's a battle nonetheless. But let's talk about your background then, first of all, in martial arts. Like, what disciplines did you do, and when did you start, and all of that?
Sure, yeah, it definitely is relevant, and I appreciate you bringing it up. It's actually the foundation of the individual work that I do in my business. I'm a martial arts instructor. I've ran a professional martial arts academy for close to 11 years now, and these swords, by the way, are real. I earned them. The one on the top is actually my wife's sword. She earned that with her receiving of her black belt. The one on the bottom is the one that I received. So they're honorary swords that you get. And when I started martial art training when I was about 9 years old. I found martial arts in, I think, the way a lot of people find it, where, as a kid, I was really trying to seek out some kind of, I don't know what it was. Like, I felt alienated from a lot of my peer groups. I didn't feel like I was normal, so I was picked on a lot as a kid. I wasn't formally educated. I was homeschooled, so that had a lot to do with it. And so for me, martial arts was it. When I saw the first martial art demonstration that I was at a local community center in my area, I just couldn't, it was blown away how these rather unassuming people were getting up and performing these movements with such power and grace. And it was just incredible. And I was like, wow, it's so empowering to watch them perform these martial art techniques. And at the same time, as you're witnessing that power and that strength and those amazing capabilities that could, be totally devastating if, you can really hurt somebody with these techniques. There was this aura of calmness and non-aggressiveness and peace, and they were the nicest people. So they're on stage doing these crazy moves and it just looked like a battleground. And then you would talk to them after and they were just so happy and joyful and confident, but not like arrogant. And I looked at it and I was like, wow, like that's what I want to be. I don't know what it was. It was just a natural pull. So at the time when I was at that age, my parents were concerned about martial arts because they didn't have a full understanding of it. I think they got the impression, like many parents do, that it's encouraging violence or something. And I'm going to start getting into fights. And, at the time too, my parents were very hardcore Christian background. So they looked at it as, oh, well, it's an Eastern influence philosophically, and it goes against our basic principles. So maybe it's not a good thing. So I felt, horrible inside that they weren't allowing me at that time to pursue martial arts. So I pursued it in secret. And I would go to the library. I would go look at the sports section, the history section, and start looking into it and reading these books, and found the Bruce Lees and the Gichin Funakashis and, the Sakuraba and all that kind of stuff. Started getting into it. And then I started looking into the philosophy of it. And that's what I was like, I wanted to know not just what the moves were, but I wanted to understand that mindset. What was that warrior mindset all about? So you start reading the back sections of many of these martial art books and they get into the philosophy. So what I did is I trained in my backyard by myself whenever I could. My parents weren't around. And then eventually I just kept trying to talk to my parents and just say, hey, it's not actually about violence. Like here's chapter and verse of where it is, what the whole point of it is. And it's not what you think. You've been misinformed about it. So I got my first dose of trying to speak reason to these misunderstandings by debating my parents about martial arts. And I eventually won the debate. And then around, I think it was the age of 11, I signed up. They permitted me to sign up at the local karate school. And as they saw the transition from the way I used to be when I was younger to what I became in the years following my karate training, they were like, this kid is night and day. Like he's healthy, he's confident, he's happy, he's not violent, he's not out there getting in fights, he's actually avoiding fights, he's actually, it's keeping him on the straight and narrow. This is a really good thing. And then my parents slowly became my biggest fans and supporters. And to this day, they're just like, wow, what you've accomplished is incredible. And they're very, very supportive. So I've trained martial arts since I was 9. I've studied a variety of martial arts. I started in karate, Shotokan karate, and then I moved through to ninjutsu and boxing. I had to train at 2 different locations. So it was like Tuesday, Thursdays with ninjutsu, Monday, Wednesdays with boxing. And then, then I transitioned into Japanese jiu-jitsu and kickboxing. And then, I've trained a variety of different styles. And to this day, I train a mixed format of martial arts. I've kept it very eclectic in the same way that I keep my research and the work that I do in the podcasting field as eclectic. And I like it that way. And it was the work of Bruce Lee that really, really got me to what I feel is a more advanced level of thinking in martial art terms, where he didn't just write about the moves. He wrote about life. He wrote about philosophy. He wrote about, how to create an independent mind and how to, the concepts of freedom. And he was a great mix of Eastern philosophy, like the best of Eastern philosophy with the best of Western philosophy, because he was a philosophy student. And I found that to be unique. So I started seeking out more people like Bruce Lee. And then I found so many different doors were open to me. I came across so much material. And then that's what inspired me to, keep training, but also to start teaching martial arts and then building my own academy. And so for me, the warrior philosophy, the warrior ethos is the backbone behind everything that I do. And it has profoundly changed my life. It has changed the lives of the many, many students that I've had the privilege and honor of working with. And I now have a network of people that I interact with, both on a martial art and philosophical level, and also on the sort of research level, where we bring all those ideas and we say, okay, these are all fine and good, but how do they relate to a person living in the 21st century? And then you build in the whole warrior mindset and the individuation process and the empowerment process and the health process. And you start to see that some of the elements within the martial art tradition are what I feel our society is missing. It's what they're missing in the school system. It's what many kids are missing. This process of building healthy self-esteem, self-value, the understanding that we have to deal with the reality of the world. We can't always be pie in the sky. We have to deal with the reality of the world. And martial arts is a great introduction to that. Where basically in my training, I operate in a scientific lab where I can test principles that are universal in a martial art context and test it out in a way. So it gives a physical proving ground for you to help exercise your mind, not just your body, but to also gain some clarity mentally and spiritually and emotionally, and then empower your life so that you are more equipped to serve yourself, to serve your family, to serve your friends, your community, and hopefully even impact the world in a positive way. So there's some great things in there. I've done many presentations, live presentations, episodes on my Truth Warrior show, which you can just find on YouTube. Just look up Truth Warrior. I've done many shows breaking down all of those principles, and I've gotten nothing but incredible feedback and support for it. I was even at a conference in Philadelphia doing a talk on this and just trying to relate to, the individual and how you build a healthy mindset in this crazy, chaotic time. And after the talk, man, I had a lineup of people that had never heard this information in this way. And they were crying and they were sharing their personal stories with me. And they were just like, thank you. I didn't even know I was going to hear a talk like that. And it just made me go, I looked at my wife and she was blown away too. She's like, oh my God. I said, all right, well, this is what I have to do. I have to focus on this because this seems to be one of the deficiencies in our culture right now. And people are dying for this kind of information. So that's where I've dedicated my own personal work. And then my work with Michael, we talk about all that stuff and even more, and even on a deeper level. And it all works very, very well with the whole martial art concept.
Yeah, and I think it's as well, this goes against, we're definitely going to get into some ideologies for sure as we move along, including things like, say, the spiritual, the New Age movement, and aspects of that being kind of fake spirituality in a way. And there's certain ideas going around of violence is bad, conflict is bad, right across the board, and that's all there is to it. And I was kind of used to think like that myself at one stage. I've been around other people who thought that way, and it actually sets you up for a fall, because either you're going to be conformist and quite docile and think that conflict is bad, so you never expose yourself to it, or you just end up not engaging in this kind of conflict we were talking about. And I think that martial arts gives you that confidence to deal with, physical struggle and pain, and also makes you deal with the concept of fear and being calm when it comes to conflict. And I think that being the other mindset of being too docile and being afraid is what the controlling types are counting on to in other words, the warrior philosophy thing suits the whole rebellion thing better, kind of.
Yeah, you've really nailed it. I couldn't agree more. And it's, dealing with fear, we have an epidemic of anxiety, depression, and suicide across all ages, across all spectrums, genders, doesn't matter. Although there are, differentials, like it seems like men, especially white males for whatever reason, are committing suicide in very, very high rates. There's, and even children now. Like I live on an island in British Columbia where there is an extremely high rate of teen suicide. And it's incredible. So the fallout from the lack of this kind of education in young people is evident everywhere. And then we see it also in, the adult communities as well, that people are lacking a sense of self-identity, a sense of self-worth, a sense of self-esteem. And so they're not operating on a platform, which I think is a healthy way to interface with the world. So the martial art tradition, and the martial art tradition is just one of many that are talking about this, but it's very unique in that it's talking about combat. It's not just like yoga where you're sitting in these poses and it's great for flexibility and maybe having some peace of mind, but there is an overly passive ideology that is contained within the New Age movement and in the religious movements, etc. And there's a reason for that. And I don't agree with that. And I'm obviously not someone that advocates violence or advocates going out and causing harm to everybody. I believe that, you should do no harm. But that doesn't mean that we live on a planet that everybody agrees with you on that statement. There's people out there that, whether physically or even psychologically, are going to bridge that gap, or they're going to cross that bridge, and they're going to infringe on your sovereignty, and they're going to attack you in one way, shape, or form. And if you're not equipped to deal with that, if you're not empowered and strengthened to deal with that, then you will constantly be being beaten down, and you'll start to give up the sovereignty of your own mind. And there's an old quote that I always love, and it says, if you don't control your mind, someone else will. So in a context that maybe your listeners will understand, the value of the martial art ethos is not just reserved for your ability to physically defend yourself. I mean, that's an important thing. Somebody crosses the line, you have every moral right and even an obligation to stand up against injustice and criminality and tyranny and defend your physical self and your property and your family and your loved ones, okay? But let's not forget about psychological violence. Let's not forget about the fact that you are always in a space of internal conflict. Human beings we're almost schizophrenic by nature. We're constantly in internal conflict. And many of the myths and legends, and even in religions, you see this archetypal story played out again and again and again. In fact, all the superhero movies, all the culture, all the stories, all the best stories are about conflict. There's a protagonist and antagonist. There's a concept of good and evil, or good versus evil. And even though we live in a time where they're trying to blend those lines, there's some very great examples of how there's an internal conflict within each individual. And these stories are there to help instill an idea that is, well, if you win the conflict within, then you're not going to be engaged in conflicts externally with other people. So this is what's amazing about it, is it's a proactive measure to dealing with your own inner climate. So I'll just talk about climate change and what are we going to do about the climate? What about the internal climate? What about what's going on internally and psychologically? And, Carl Jung spoke about this, and many of the great psychologists and philosophers talked about these concepts. And in the martial art tradition, it's the whole thing. The whole thing is about sovereignty and freedom and preserving it and fighting against tyranny and knowing when to use your skills and knowing when not to, developing a philosophical ethos or system of virtues. Like there are 7 virtues of the samurai. All these different martial arts have these tenets of moral character and a very deep influence in developing moral character in people. And by doing that, you empower people to have the right tools to live a successful and fulfilling life. I think there's this feeling from the religious dogma that we've been raised with that morality is something that is enforced by the threat of violence or some hell after you're dead. It's like fear is used to try to make people moral. Whereas in the philosophies that I'm talking about, it's something that's encouraged and explained in a way that benefits you, not just in a way where someone's shaking a stick at you and forcing you. And so it's a different way of looking at it. And that's what really helped me when I was growing up to navigate a lot of the ideas that I was exposed to about, oh my God, there's some God somewhere that's judging every move I make, kind of like Santa Claus. He knows everything I'm doing. And if I step out of line, I'm punished. And if I step too far out of line, I'm punished for all of eternity. And so there's a guilt-ridden element to it instead of an empowering, uplifting, educational element to it. So that's what I found that was unique. And what my job is, I feel, is to look at these different warrior philosophies and traditions and try to take what I feel are the best parts of them, because there are many elements within these traditions that I don't agree with, but what you do is you take the best of it and you try to bring it into a context where it can actually serve you in this time and empower your life and give you a sense of what freedom is, what it is to have the ownership of your own mind and your own body, what it is to respect yourself to a point where you will pursue a healthy lifestyle. Because let's be honest, a lot of people that are living a very unhealthy lifestyle probably haven't connected the dots that has a source to it internally, psychologically. Somewhere along the line, you started to move towards self-sadistic thoughts, self-hatred attitudes. And so subconsciously, you don't mind eating all the garbage food and doing all the things, even putting in bad information into your mind and staying close to negative people and all that kind of stuff. You don't mind doing it because deep down you hate yourself. You revile yourself because you've bought into a system of programming that is trying to use that as a way of converting you into a unit of this big collective, of this equality that they're trying to institute into our culture and into our society throughout the education system and the media, etc. So being a warrior, to me, being a truth warrior, is a person that is fearlessly going after the truth. All right, not meaning you won't feel fear, but you recognize what fear is and you use it as a motivator and you use it as a teacher, not as something to repress. And you go and you look for the truth, not just the truth about something that happened in history, the truth about what happened with World War II or 9/11 or any of these other things. It's the truth ultimately about you and your purpose for being here and what is a human being. And in this time, with all the new technology coming out and the AI and the robot future and all this kind of stuff, I don't think there's a more important question that you could ask. What does it mean to be human? Do I value what it means to be human? Do I value my right as a human being to say, you know what? I see everybody going down that one direction. This whole collective group is going towards that one direction. And you know what? I don't think that direction is good for me in my life. So I'm going to walk away and walk the road of the outsider to not follow the herd, but to think for myself autonomously and independently. And if you spend a few minutes just listening to some of the interviews Bruce Lee did, that's all he talked about. And it blew the minds of a lot of the interviewers he spoke to. It was almost over their heads because he was ahead of his time. And he was talking about, living an authentic life, learning how to express yourself freely. You can't express yourself freely and connect to who you really are and access your potential if you are living vicariously through the herd of other people around you. So these are the valuable points that I've tried to bring through in my work. We definitely talk about this on Unslaved to a deep degree as well. And the impact that this information has had that I've seen on young people, old people, doesn't matter what background, has just radically changed my life and has definitely changed their lives. So that's why I keep doing this work. And I enjoy doing this work because I see the positive impact that it has.
And speaking of the whole, we were talking about the toughness thing and dealing with conflict, and then you nicely brought it out into the bigger picture. And you spoke about, pushing ahead fearlessly, or, once you're kind of switched on to what's happening. And what kind of specific advice would you give to, all these people all over the world right now who are starting to wake up, but who might be struggling with, the psychopathy they're dealing with? What would you say to those people when it comes to being tough and being resilient?
Yeah, what a great question. It's probably the one question I get the most, and I don't know if I have the answer, but I would say this. My advice would be, if you can spend even 15 minutes a day working on you, having alone time, no screens, no phones, nobody badgering you, no listening to other people's opinions, just you, going to sit by a lake or going for a walk in a park or doing an activity you enjoy, awakening your somatic intelligence, which is the intelligence of the body, and, understanding the development of the mind-body connection. When you spend some time with yourself, the personal development stuff, like get into that, and learning how to ignore all the haters that you're going to attract when you go on that journey, and recognizing why you have these haters and trolls in your life that are going to try to pull you back down. What we're dealing with is the crab in the bucket scenario. Okay, the crab in the bucket story. I'm sure everybody's heard it, but really quickly, crabs by nature, you've got a crab in a bucket by himself. You start putting more crabs in. One crab starts trying to navigate his way out of the bucket. And for some reason, all the other crabs just pull him back in. They don't want him to go out of the bucket. So, there's an element within human beings that we have a tribal instinct. And when in the right context, the tribal instinct can be quite valuable. You have connection to family, you have connection to your culture, to your people, to your ideals, to whatever. But when taken to an extreme, the tribal instinct can eradicate your individual sovereignty and your individual identity. It's like the Borg from Star Trek. Like, you will assimilate. And you got to remember that all that stuff is based in fear. So all the reactions you're going to get from friends, from family members that are going to shout down your journey. You're on a journey of trying to discover truth in your life. You're on a journey of trying to create a fulfilling and happy life for yourself and your family, okay? And no one has the right to tread on that. No one has the right to tell you what's right for you. You have the right to experiment, to make mistakes on your journey, to go on your own individual journey of trying to learn about yourself and the world and how things work and get around all these very, very complicated subjects that everybody's talking about right now. And you have the sovereign right and the moral right to pursue that on your own course and do it in your own way. And if you have people around you that are trying to pull you away from that journey and tell you, what are you doing talking about all this stuff? Or what are you doing trying to live a healthier life? I've even had people that they actively make fun of me and troll me because I promote a healthy lifestyle. Just that. That's how programmed people are. And you go, well, of course the people that are going to hate on you for those things, for thinking for yourself, for having different kinds of opinions, for speaking passionately about what you're passionate about without fear. The people that are going to critique you about that are living in a space of envy, and they're living in a space of repression. And they want you to join them in their misery. Misery loves company, right? So everybody walking around with all this health epidemics and psychological health epidemics, all this stuff we hear about, do you really want to impress those people? Are all the actions in your life going to be completely geared around impressing a bunch of toxic, uneducated, uninformed, dumbed down people that are refusing to look at facts objectively, that are refusing to go on their own journey? They're living vicariously through celebrities, through media. They have no idea where their opinions come from. If you actually, I don't care what subject it is, okay? I don't care what it is. If you start asking the average person some basic questions when you talk about, I don't care what it is, you'll find out really quickly, most people that are the loudest with their opinion about whatever it is are the least informed about it. Why does that exist in the adult population? Why does that exist? Well, how does that manifest? Well, it manifests because people psychologically are repressing trauma. We all know this. The elites know this. The people that do all the productions on Madison Avenue in Hollywood, they know this. The people that make the commercials to sell you all these things, they know this. They know you're traumatized. They understand your psychology to a very, very advanced level. They have people working on this 24/7, and they've been working on it for a long time about how to master your mind and get you to follow the carrot on the stick, okay? And yet here we are as individuals completely ignorant of psychology and understanding, repression and trauma and guilt complexes and how propaganda works and all these kinds of, we're totally not even playing on the same field at all. And so what we're trying to do with Unslaved is level the playing field and say, okay, let's use those knowledge bases that the CIA and the Tavistock Institute and the Frankfurt School and all these orgs and the UN Council groups and the advisory committees and the roundtable, all that knowledge that ultimately comes from ancient secret societies that have collected this data for thousands of years, that know how you tick inside and out. That knowledge is now available. So we're going to teach it to you so that you can use it to empower your life and take the sovereignty of your mind back. So if you're going to go on that journey, you're going to get a lot of attacks from everywhere because you're not dealing with people that are even close to understanding how this stuff works. So if you're listening to the show right now, you're already 10 steps ahead of all those people that are hating on you for acting independently and acting in your own best interest in this regard. And you know what's interesting, man? There's been some studies that have come out recently, and we know this. The more you argue facts with people that are ignorant of the facts, the more you harden their position against you. Facts, for some reason, are like people are allergic to facts and truth, and they're allergic to that process of it. And it's because they've been programmed that way. We've been raised in that culture. So the way out is to find peace in knowing that, A, you're not alone in this journey. There are people all over the world that are waking up. I mean, there are shows like yours, Emmett. There's shows like mine. And there's so many other people that have different means of distributing this information to you. And there's so many people waking up to this. So you're not alone in it. But let's just say you were. Let's say you were the only person on the entire planet that was thinking independently. Take knowledge in knowing that you're operating in line with that universal force that we all talk about. You can call it God, you can call it nature, you can call it whatever word you want to use, because you're listening to your own innate guides, your internal guides. You're not just taking information that someone gives to you, believing it without questioning it, and then stepping in line with the rest of the sheep. You're thinking independently. And that's all we want to encourage. So, the other thing you don't want to do is go out with this feeling like you're better than other people and talk down to people and be like, oh, you're stupid, you don't understand. Don't even bother. Don't debate with fools. They'll just drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. Don't do that. Make this your journey. Make this your journey. And when you do that, you are now free. You are unslaved from the tyranny of the masses. That is just, it's incredible. And you can get into so many people's work on this. We talk a lot about people like Gustave Le Bon, who did this work on, he wrote a book called The Crowd. We referenced a lot with people like Ayn Rand and many others that brought in very important elements to how this whole thing works. But if basically it boils down to this, if you value your freedom and your sovereignty, if you value your life, then it's ill-advised to go out and just follow the status quo blindly. Okay. You have to think independently, and that takes time. That takes work. It's the same thing in martial arts. When someone walks in, they've got no experience training martial arts. My job is to sort of deprogram a lot of habits and patterns that would not work well if they're going to be successful in martial arts, and then retrain them how to work more efficiently. That's really what you have to do on your own journey when it comes to understanding how all this stuff works. But don't get down on all the opposition that you're going to get. In fact, if you're pissing people off with your opinions, if you're having conflict with people around you that are not, like I said, actively looking into these things, and they don't have that level of care that you do for these things, then you're actually doing a great job. You're actually on the right track. The more resistance you see, the more you realize, okay, maybe it's me against the world, but it doesn't matter, because I'm seeking the truth. And that's a noble virtue. And that idea, it only existed in the way that we see it in Western culture. And it's very unique to Western culture. And it's that element, that independent element, that the globalists right now want to completely eradicate. So there's an entire campaign that's working against you, that's funded with billions and billions of dollars. And so, don't give yourself any illusion that you can fix it all by yourself. But I do believe that you can fix it for yourself in your own world, and let other people, decide what's best for them.
Speaking of the empowerment thing, and I'm glad I asked you about that, because it's something that's probably often overlooked, is the fact that we're dealing with this spiritual kind of warfare, and it is psychological, and it can be tough to keep going, and sometimes depending on your environment, who you're around, and sometimes it's just the luck of the draw, depending on your background and things like that. And so I'm glad I asked you about that. And I noticed one of your last guests was Kent. What was the man's second name?
Kent Lisby.
That's right, yeah. And you speaking of how the system operates, and who many people probably aren't aware of how it rolls. This guy was a background in the CIA, and he's speaking about espionage. And I mean, this is just one story and one example of the control system and what we're up against. But tell us about that interview, and what did he have to say?
Yeah, that was a really interesting interview with Kent. It was great to have him on to comment from an insider's perspective. We try to reference as many actual, good quality sources as possible with these things, but we've long been covering the subject of the history of this political correct, cultural Marxist, socialist type agenda. I don't know, there's so many terms that have been thrown at it, but you can recognize it as the collectivist conspiracy, for lack of a better word. And actually, when I asked Kent about that idea of a conspiracy of some kind, he made no bones about it and saying, oh, well, conspiracy is a legitimate term. In fact, working in the field of espionage and intelligence agencies, it's all about conspiracy. That's the name of the game. We're living in a game of global political chess. And in order to gain an advantage, you're going to use strategy, and you're going to conceal information, and you're going to make moves that are going to support your agenda. And if you have a bunch of global powers, people around the world, different organizations, no matter whether they're government, whether they're private, whether they're corporate, whatever, that are all competing in this turf war, then that conspiracy is going to be involved in that. So the fact that people scoff at that and try to downplay it, they're just uneducated about it, to be honest with you. In fact, if you look up the word conspiracy in a good sociological dictionary, you'll actually see that it's a very legitimate term. As long as the information that's being given is not spurious, it's not just an opinion, it's got to be given with facts. But I mean, just go down to your local courthouse and see how many people are being convicted of one conspiracy or another. So I thought that was an interesting part of the show that we did with Kent. It was just a quick little clip, but it's important for people that are looking into this. Because the minute I start getting into some of this stuff, they're like, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. And it's like, well, do you understand who creates these terms, where they come from and how they're used and how they're weaponized so that you don't look into information and criminals get to keep running amok? Come on, like wake up. We used to think the mafia didn't exist. We used to think that, the government was there to serve your best interest. And now obviously information has come out to show that's not the case. So Kent Clisby, he wrote a book called Willing Accomplices, which I can't recommend enough. You can actually check him out at willingaccomplices.com. And this is from his website. It's basically the synopsis of the book where he says, this is how Willing Accomplices is how a KGB covert influence agents created political correctness and are aiming to destroy America. And so Kent has a background in professional counterintelligence. So in his analysis and in his opinion, he has tracked down espionage penetrations into America's cultural core that created the idea of political correctness that resulted in Obama's political platform of cultural suicide, the whole multiculturalism narrative, the Democrat Party's core belief system, and the hate America first attitude of the American elites. So he's speaking in an American context, but we can recognize this same ideology of not just hate America, but hating America and what it stands for on its base principles. We're not talking about the actions that certain presidents and leaders that have corrupted those principles in American politics have done. The illegal invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, all the different chicanery that goes on in Washington. We know it's a viper's den, as Washington called it. It always has been. But the core principles of individual freedom, right to private property, all these different things, they are what are under attack in all Western nations because they don't want to have independent nation states. They don't want to have, they want the education system to be set up under Common Core. They want as little alternative decision-making as possible. And so what Kent brought out was the idea that you can actually track these ideas to a gentleman named Willy Mutzenberg, who, I'm trying to get on his website. What did he say? Oh yeah, Willy Mutzenberg was an energetic German who perfected covert influence built on Gumberg's. Gumberg is another Russian agent who unbelievable successes and brought the covert influence operations to the heartland of the U.S. He constructed a series of popular front organizations, and Americans who participated in these organizations felt like they were special and part of an elite. And he's basically describing how this was all scripted out and it was a part of an agenda to bring America down to its knees during the age of the Soviet Union. And I mean, this has been going on for a long time. And basically the idea was that you can see these ideas in people like Michael Moore. You can see them in many of the social progressives now, the liberals now. You can see it in their agendas. You can hear it in, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You can see it in all even the celebrities. They're all talking about how America sucks. America is a racist, bigoted, homophobic, greedy, capitalist, horrible, evil influence in the world. So we have to start the revolution, bring it down to its knees, and convert it into. And there's a question mark. There's no real plan, on the surface. It's just like, oh well, America's bad. The principles of freedom and independence and sovereignty are bad. Because it's not about the greater good for the greater numbers. So we have to get in there, uproot it, destroy it, and then we'll build something in its place. And of course, that's the whole argument that's how the Soviet Union happened. That's how the regime under Mao Zedong happened in China. That's how Hitler was able to gain power through the National Socialist Party. He didn't come in through any right-wing group. Fascism is often associated with right-wing extremism. It's kind of funny to me because it came out of left-wing politics. It's all collectivism. It's just different brands of the same shit. So we got into that a little bit. There was a few things that I think I probably disagree with Kent on certain things, but that's just my own personal opinion. But his focus was, look, when you're seeing all this PC progressivism in flooding our education system, it's not a coincidence. When you see all this stuff about social justice warriors and Antifa groups and all of this, the hate speech and the laws and all that, none of that is by accident. It was planned well in advance. It's actually an intelligence operation. And he names the names, tracks the history, and exposes it in great detail. So that's definitely an episode that people can go check out and learn more about And I know Michael has gone in and updated a lot of the links on that episode, so you can see other elements in that narrative as well. But basically, just this understanding that we live in a world that is very complex. And when you're understanding how the dynamic of acquisition of power works, and how the nature of psychopathy and the nature of a lot of these organizations and their histories, you'll start to see a different picture of how the world actually works. And then, the minute you even hint that any of this stuff was planned, or any of this stuff was overtly, or any of this stuff was done on purpose, then you're going to be thrown into the category of being a conspiracy theorist. And it's easy for people to now dismiss that, because that term, again, was a propaganda term to basically try to manage the fallout of all of these facts coming to light. And so, it's a fascinating show, and there was a lot of great information we covered there.
Yeah, the constant theme, as I'm sure you well know, you've known for years, and the theme that you're constantly dealing with in Unslaved, and what I'm dealing with is the mechanisms of control and the bigger picture. And the reason why this persists all through our history constantly is that people are a lot naive. Not everybody, of course, we're not all on the same level, but the reason why this stuff continues the way it does, and you have people coming out talking about conspiracy theories, is because they're just naive to the idea that there are manipulative, control freak personality types in the world. That's just, I mean, you would think
at the highest level too.
Yeah, exactly. And you would think that even just an ordinary person who lives a full life and who moves around interacting with different personalities, and who's honest about those interactions, will realize that there is such a thing as control. There is such a thing as bullying and manipulation. I've met so-and-so guy or so-and-so girl who are a little bit like that. Imagine if they had $10 billion inheritance. Imagine if they were related to some royal family member. Is it possible that they could be that manipulative and arrogant and evil? Well, yeah, it's not such a leap to get to this stuff. But I think people are so conditioned that the minute, like you said, they go away from the official narrative, they think it's all the realm of fantasy. It's like, it is by design. I think somebody deliberately organized the game that way, and they've covered the bases in advance. The minute you stray from that herd, everybody points, and then the response comes back then.
Yeah, and it's good to talk about these things in a theoretical way, but then when you start getting specific, and you start naming facts and names and historical periods, and getting into reading from the actual people that are working and controlling organizations like the UN, and what their agendas are, and the fact that they're looking to literally set up a world parliamentary system. What is that? That's a world government. That's what it is. So if people want to say, well, what are we talking about when we talk about any of these agendas or conspiracies or whatever you want to call it? The biggest one to look into is this goal for a uniting of the world. And when I say that, the average person will say, that sounds brilliant. That sounds like John Lennon's Imagine. That sounds like what we all want. We want to unite the world. Because if we unite the world, won't there be more peace? Won't there be more prosperity? Won't there be more freedom? Right? Like that's what it sounds like. And when you go, if you just go to sustainabledevelopment.un.org, okay, or go to the UN site and just start reading through these documents. Many people, they talk about these documents, they don't actually read them, okay? You look at, little passages. I got one here about this idea that they're trying to set up an international parliament, okay? So just hear the language, and then we'll dissect it a little bit. Parliaments are essential for the creation of a political general will. They are important agents involved in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and its SDGs. This is not only the case at the national level, but at the international level as well. A new UN Parliamentary Assembly should accompany the 2030 Agenda. The European Parliament, for instance, needs to set the 2030 Agenda as an important framework for the external relations of the European Union, and should push the EU's pioneering role in the promotion of a rules-based, open, non-discriminatory, and equitable multilateral trading system. So let's look at some of those words. That sounds great, doesn't it? Sounds amazing. We're going to try to create a general political will because we need to have consensus. We need a consensus. That's what's going to fix the world, is if we can get everybody in consensus. Well, all right, consensus about what? Please tell me what we're getting consensus about, okay? Because there's nothing wrong with consensus in the sense that, say, you and me, Emmett, we agree that neither one of us are going to impose on each other's will or freedom in any violent way. We're not going to commit any acts of violence or aggression against each other. That's a great consensus to have. It sounds great, right? But when you dissect what they're actually talking about, they're not talking about consensus about the issues that matter. They're talking about consensus around specific issues. So this is where you have to get very specific with people. So let's look at that first statement, okay? And just so you know, if you read through these documents, the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, even this Migrant Pact, the UN Migrant Pact, or the Global Vaccine Mandate Pact that they're trying to force upon the nations of the world, or whatever issue it is, it's always the same argument. Doesn't matter what you think about, say, something like vaccines or what you think about one independent thing. It's about the fact that they want to create a general political will and they want to enforce that and basically impose it on the world. So parliaments are essential for the creation of a political general will. They are important agents involved in the implementation of this agenda that we have laid out. We, the elites that know what's best for the world and have never made any mistakes in the past, of course. So you can totally trust that we know exactly what we're doing. We're not going to screw anything up. Don't worry about it. This agenda is going to fix everything. This is not something that's based on the national level. It has to be about the international level. We need a UN Parliamentary Assembly that will accompany the agenda. So you have the agenda. So you go read the agenda to know what specifically they want. And I'll read what that is in a minute for you. But then you have to realize that, okay, now they're actually saying we need a global government system to impose it, to implement it, and to work in the media, to work in the education system, to have to work everywhere to eradicate dissent. They don't want dissent. They don't want they want complete consensus in the scientific community, in the medical community, and in the general population. And how do you do that? Hitler wanted consensus. All those tyrants wanted consensus. They were all utopians. They all said, if I have the power, it's all about the will of the people and the greater good for the greater number. Follow me. And if you don't, you're going to be executed or eliminated or expunged. But follow me and I'm going to save the world. And every time we've tried this experiment, it has failed, and not just failed like a little bit, oh, we could use a few tune-ups. No, like failed dramatically in terms of respecting human sovereignty and any kind of level of humanity of any kind. There's always violence that ensues. So this UN Parliamentary Assembly should work. So they're asking for the EU, the European Union, one of the most corrupt organizations, one of the corrupt bureaucratic organizations on the face of the planet, that it needs to implement Agenda 2030. And it's on and on you can go, and you start reading the legal arguments and the legalese and all this kind of stuff. They're promoting a rules-based. What does that mean? Rules-based. What rules? Enforced by whom and to what degree? Open, meaning open. What is that? Like, oh, no borders. Okay, they don't want borders. Non-discriminatory, meaning this is the equality argument that is being pushed through all this political correctness, social justice stuff. Not equality in the way you think, equality in a totally different way. And if you really take it to extreme, equality in misery, if it actually goes through. And equitable, multilateral trading. Equitable, what is equitable? Well, you need to understand the difference between equity, so equality of outcome, or equality of opportunity. See, the American free market system, which wasn't just American, this is a Western system, you can go back to the history of it. The idea of a free market system was to basically allow you as an independent agent to create a product, put it in the market. You don't have all this red tape and government control, gashing you, taking all your money and giving it to God knows who, and interfering with the process of the product. You let the market decide whether the product is a yay or a nay. You let the market as you and me. We decide, oh, do we like the iPhone or do we like the Samsung Galaxy? We decide what we're going to do. We have choice. That's free choice. You have free market, you have free choice. If you have a market that is completely dominated and controlled by red tape and government regulations, and you have these world parliaments that we're so removed from the individual in any society or any country that there's no say coming from you. It's all literally dictated to you. Then you don't have a free market, and they're going to force all of these different quotas. Like, so now if you see in all the governments, like in Canada and many European governments, they have gender quotas. They have religious representative quotas, which means we bring Islamic people into our parliament, and they're now gaining power. And in Canada, for example, in Ontario, there's actually an Islamic party. It's called the Islamic Party of Ontario, and they're chapter and verse supporting Sharia law and hoping to gain enough power to implement Sharia law into Canadian politics. And they're actually arguing that Islam is the original religion of Canada. Where did that? I don't know where that came from. Go speak to the natives here and let me know what they think about that. But anyways,
exactly, yeah. What
happens when you allow this? So people think about the language, and it's written so well that they don't connect the dots as to where this goes wrong and how the implications are for your freedom and for what kind of, it's unbelievable. So let's just quickly look at this. Okay. So the UN public relations machine is saying that the UN is a champion of human rights. The real UN is actually an enemy of human rights because they don't recognize individual rights. They recognize collective rights, okay? And those are rights they give. They are God. They are setting themselves up as, your rights are not given to you by your creator or by nature or whatever. Your rights are written by us, dictated by us, can be changed by us without notice, and will be enforced by us, okay? The UN front is saying that it's responsive to the will of the people, when in fact it's a global dictatorship where the will of the individual is sacrificed to the majority. The UN will say, oh, we're a force for peace in the world, when in fact they're a military aggressor that interferes in the relations of other nations. And so if you look at Agenda 21 and you see that Agenda 2030 is just an updated version of it, here's the points if you really boil it down. If they implement this agenda, it's an end to national sovereignty. Okay? So your nation will not represent you as a person in your nation. It will represent the mandate as dictated to by the UN and all the assemblies and all the other orgs and all the elites, okay? The state, which is global, it'll be a global state, planning and management of all resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans, fresh water, agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, and its job is to ensure equity. Its job is to ensure equity, and you have to get into understanding the equity claims that comes out of Marxism. The state role is to define the role of business and financial resources, not the free market, not the will of the people. It's going to be mandated by the state. So that is the definition of socialism and communism: state control over the means of production. That never goes well, never. Abolition of private property, because it's not sustainable for you to have private property. So all the land is owned by the state and controlled by the UN Council.
Wow, that's very that's Communist Manifesto talk.
Yeah. Well, and just about that, here's an interesting thing to do. Go and look up, for those listening, go and look up the UN Charter of Rights and Freedoms, or the Human Rights Charter, okay? Read it side by side with Stalin's, from Soviet Russia, the same Charter of Human Rights. Okay, so this was the human rights that was written up in the Soviet Union under communism, under Stalin and Lenin. They wrote it. It's almost verbatim the UN Charter of Human Rights. So when they're like, we're a champion of human rights. Yeah, but what kind of human rights? Let's look at the fine print. Let's look at the track record of this ideology. Let's read this through, shall we? And you go through it and compare them side by side. Your mind will be opened. They want restructuring of the family unit. Where else have we heard that? Of course they need to restructure the family unit, because if you go with the free market concept and the old school liberty values, the family unit is the bedrock of a free society. But they don't want the family unit anymore because it's an independent agent and it is not a part of the consensus. In order to create consensus, you can have different groups of parents teaching their kids different things. You need them all to be mind controlled by the state, so that they want the state to raise the children. And this is what the whole feminism argument is really all about. It has nothing to do with liberating women. Women were already liberated long ago. The fact of the matter is they don't want women at home raising kids and supporting the family. They want women competing with men in the workplace so that you have both parents working. And there's so many taxes and regulations and all the fees and everything go up to the point where you can't even have the old setup where you had someone at home raising the kids and teaching the kids and, the family raising the kids. And then maybe one of the parents is out working. You can't have that dynamic anymore. Everybody's working. Your job will be assigned to you and you'll be told what your job will be because it's all about equity. So if you have a passion in life, sorry, it's not equal for you to go and pursue that. It's all going to be decided for you what you're going to do. Major restrictions on movement and human activity are a huge part of this because it's all about saving the climate, and humans are bad. So we got to manage population levels and control where you can go and where you can't go. Creation of human settlement zones. Human settlement zones, that's the mass migration thing. It's human settlement. So they're moving people out of those continents, Northern Africa, the Middle East. They're moving them out and bringing them to the West, not to save them from war and poverty, because they could have done that a long ago. In fact, many of these people, many of these organizations are responsible for allowing these dictatorships to rise up and allowing the situation to happen over there. So they pull the bait and switch. We screwed it up. We're going to bring everybody over here. This is the restricted access or limited access, and we're just going to use it for resources. The dumbing down in education. I mean, I don't even need to talk about that. And then, of course, population management. So literally discussions openly about how we have to manage the overpopulation. And here's all of our plans on how we're going to do it. And guys, this is just what they're admitting publicly on their website.
Yeah, they're telling us.
If you read through it. Yeah, they're telling us to your face, let alone what they're not telling you. I mean, this should get your hackles up if anything else doesn't. So, this is really just scratching the surface because the UN is really just a branch of the real controllers in the world, the real groups and families and power dynamics and dynasties and empires that are age old, that are bloodline, that are connected, that are part of these secret control groups that exist all over the world. This is just scratching the surface of this stuff. And we cover this on a very deep level on Unslaved. So what this is to say, it brings back this philosophical question. Do you have a right to your own life? Are you free? Or, as what is being said in these documents and what is being propagandized everywhere, is freedom bad? Are you stupid? Are you too stupid to manage your own life and decide your own destiny? Or do we need an all-powerful state to dictate to you how you should live your life, what the fate of the entire world is going to be? So all of history, all of everything is all going to be out the window because we have a small, tiny group of people that are literally going to manage and mandate the entire world. Think about this. Sounds like something out of a bad movie. And yet here it is happening right in front of our faces. And I remember talking about this back in the day, back in early 2000s, and people be like, they're not going to create a world government. You're crazy. You're a bunch of crazy people. You're super paranoid. And then you start seeing it in the newspapers, like New World Order, world government. We want a world government. We need world governments. We need global governance. They have all these names for it. And then you see them implementing it, and you see now it's all about, borders are bad. We don't want borders. National sovereignty, that means you're a Nazi. And all these, it's incredible. And you go, wow, really? Now the debate isn't whether or not they're trying to set up this tyrannical global international parliament. It's whether or not it's a good thing or not. So that's where we're at. So we're here to say, okay, are we allowed to be skeptical? Are we allowed to question this? We got some questions for you. You haven't done a good job answering it. I kind of want to know what your motives really are, or whether these people are just brainwashed, whether they're witting, unwitting, I don't know, a combination of both. In the end, what we're looking at is a total nightmare when it comes to preserving sovereignty.
We start talking about Enslaved and, you're right and I'm right. Those of us who are creating information services are right to do this, because that seems to be one of the pieces that people are missing is the knowledge. So, when you read a UN document and it starts talking about population control, those of us who've studied, history, the secret societies, the royal families, all that stuff, we think, yeah, exactly. We think, how original. Someone in power is talking about eugenics or population control. What a shocker. And that's where knowledge comes in. If you've been heard of these concepts over and over again, and then you read it in a different format, you kind of join the dots and go, oh, it's the same old bullshit. Another, well-to-do nutcase has come along from a privileged background, maybe not exactly the UN people, but maybe. But I mean, the European Union, the godfather of the European Union was Count Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi. And, he's the ideological godfather of the European Union. And if you say to people, hey, there are mental nutcases in the world who think they have the right to dictate the fate of humanity and to use stuff like this, they completely think you're on another planet. And that's that naivete we were talking about. And I mean, the first League of Nations attempt was by one of the Rothschild family. I don't know, it was Nathan Rothschild or Jacob Rothschild or whatever. And the Tsar of Russia got in the way. And then what happened was the plan, the ruse failed or whatever. And then when the Russian Revolution kicked off, this was a couple of generations later, I think, they took revenge on the Tsar because he got away, the first time he got in the way of the first attempt at the League of Nations. That's what we're dealing with. Like this stuff, the concept conspiracy theory and all that makes me laugh. It's like, if you know your history, there are patterns here that will help you catch on to this stuff so much quicker.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I encourage people to actually go and just don't take it from me, David Whitehead or Emmett or Mike or anybody. Don't take it from us. We're just the messenger. We're just telling you, we're not concocting some conspiracy in our basement to sell stuff. That's not what this is about. Just go read from these people. Go read from people like Montague Norman. Go read from Winston Churchill. Go read from Benjamin Disraeli. Go read from Willy Brandt. Go read from Norman Thomas. Go read from Arnold Toynbee. Go read from Richard Garner. Go read from Zbigniew Brzezinski. I could sit here all day and give you the names, the quotes, the page numbers, everything, the article, the documents. I could tell you chapter and verse exactly where to go. So this is crystal clear. And so that this isn't just coming from some ranting, raving lunatic. This is coming from the mouths of the people that are funding, creating, and pushing these types of agendas. What we're dealing with here is a pathological, psychological virus. It's a religion that these people follow. And I know people laugh and scoff about the idea of the Illuminati, for example, right? Because we talk a lot about, these different secret societies, these orders, the ancient cults in the ancient world and their histories and all that kind of stuff. This has been going on for a long time. And if you actually look at the actual writings of people like Adam Weishaupt and what he was commissioned to do and how they were bringing this all the stuff we just talked about, the abolition of private property and inheritances, the abolition of patriotism and nationalism, the abolition of family life and the institute of marriage, the establishment of communal education of children, the abolition of all religion. Where did you hear that before? You think I originated with Karl Marx and all these other people? No, these were marching orders. This was given to them by people that came out of Germany and Europe and some of the most aristocratic families, Jesuit finance. Weishaupt was a Jesuit agent. And on we could go. Read from them, and you've got so many admittances. Like they're saying we need to divide. So this is Montague Norman. He's saying by dividing the voter through the political party system, we can get them to expend their energies in fighting for questions of no importance. It is thus by discrete action we can secure for ourselves that which has been so well planned and so successfully accomplished. And these truths are well known among our principal men who are now engaged in forming an imperialism to govern the world. Who was this guy? He was the governor of the Bank of England when he was addressing the United States Bankers Association back in 1924. We go back earlier. You could go to Winston Churchill, who's like from the days of Spartacus, Weishaupt, Marx, Trotsky, Luxemburg, and Emma Goldman. This world conspiracy has been steadily growing. So he was talking about conspiracy. This conspiracy played a definite recognizable role in the tragedy of the French Revolution. It has been the mainstream of every subversive movement during the 19th century. And now at this last band of extraordinary personalities from the underworld of the great cities of Europe and America have gripped the Russian people, talking about the Soviet Union, by the hair of their head and have become the undisputed masters of that enormous empire. So he's insinuating that the communists, the Soviet Union and that whole foundation didn't just crop up from some random revolution of people, proletariat versus the whatever. It was planned and financed from New York, from Europe, London, etc., and it was created. Okay, and then you got Benjamin Disraeli. Who was Benjamin Disraeli? He's a British politician, novelist. He was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He said, the world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. The governments of the present day have to deal not merely with other governments, with emperors, kings, and ministers, but also with secret societies, which have everywhere their unscrupulous agents and can at last moment upset all the government's plans. Okay, so these are people that live. And then I had a really good one. I won't read them all, but there was one. This is Norman Thomas. He's a former U.S. socialist presidential candidate. I can't remember the dates. I believe it was in the 60s or 70s. But he said, the American people will never knowingly adopt socialism. But under the name of liberalism, they will adopt every fragment of the socialist program until one day America will be a socialist nation without knowing how it happened. Right? And then you have, one more. This is the one. Professor Arnold Toynbee. This is in 1931. And he's speaking at an Institute for the Study of International Affairs in Copenhagen. So another, globalist institution. He says, we are at present working discreetly with all our might to wrest this mysterious force called sovereignty out of the clutches of the local nation states of the world. So this is an agenda that didn't start yesterday when Donald Trump got elected. This is an agenda that has been going on for over 100 years. And it is playing out before our eyes. And it was brought into being through secret, through lies, through manipulation. And I'll just say this, acts of good are done in the daylight. This is the whole point of having a democratic society. And we could even pick that term apart. This is the whole point of having a free society, that you have informed consent. You have informed consent about what your government is doing on your behalf, quote unquote, and with your money that you're paying them. You hired the government. That's the government. You hired the government through your tax dollars to represent you and protect your rights. But what do? They create these federal monstrosities that actually enslave you, tax you at high levels, and then they are working in tandem with these elite organizations, and they are doing things without your vote, without your consent. And this is why we have the yellow jacket movements in France, and now even in Canada, people are revolting here. There's protests all over the place. People don't always know what they're protesting, but they're reacting because they're like, man, I can't find a job that's paying me well. My taxes are too high. I'm sick of all this stuff. I don't want all this mass migration, illegal immigration. These people are being protected, and people are sick of it, and they're rebelling. And these types know how to steer those revolutions and those movements, and it's an incredible story to be told. And so that's what we try to do. And I couldn't possibly break it all down in one show, Emmett. I'm sure you feel the same way. This is why we keep doing these shows, and we interview experts, and we say, okay, don't listen to me. I'm just the guy that researches this, but let's go talk to the real people and see what they think. And I don't want to scare anybody with this stuff. This goes back to what we were talking about before, Emmett, about the warrior mindset. The warrior mindset is about understanding the reality of the world. Okay. And unfortunately, the reality of the world is not all ponies and rainbows. And I hate to break it to you. I hate to burst your bubble. It's just not.
Yeah, I'm upset. I'm a little bit upset, but go on.
Right. And I mean, but that doesn't mean there's no such thing as goodness in the world. There's no virtue in the world. We're all screwed. We're damned, whatever. No. But in order to find the solution, you must first acknowledge and address the problem. Would you agree with that? If you're an alcoholic or something, or you're on something that you feel is just, it's ruining your life, it's holding you back, and you're like, well, I'm going to live in ignorance of it. Well, then of course you're going to see the effects of that in the world. It was Ayn Rand that said we can ignore the facts of reality, but we could not ignore the consequences of ignoring the facts of reality. So that's the warrior mindset that says, okay, I'm not going to live in a pessimistic state of mind. I'm not going to live in a depressed state of mind over the ills of the world and all these different things we're talking about. But I'm going to address them with courage. It takes courage to live on this world. And even if this whole system wasn't in place, there would still be things that you would have to address with courage. I mean, even if you just go and try to survive in the wilderness, if you don't have a spine, you're not going to make it. So, that's where I'm trying to say is we need to have an understanding of, yes, the positive things that are happening, because there are many positive things happening, but we're not going to stop these kind of things from happening unless we're aware of them. You have to be aware of the fact that you've become sick or toxic in order to bring health back to your body. So in the same thing with the political body, the same thing in what's going on in the world, we have to be honest about it. And we have to keep looking at it from different perspectives. I mean, I fully admit that I'm limited in my ability to know everything, and I don't know everything, and I could be wrong. And I mean, we're trying to look over through the window at this stuff. We're just getting little clips of this and trying to put our pieces together. It's not easy to do that, but it's necessary to do that. You have to seek the truth courageously. And sometimes the truth is going to piss you off, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth looking into. And the consequences of not looking at it are incredibly dire if you look at any page of history for even 5 minutes. So it's important that we come together with a positive mindset, with a proactive mindset, that we're here to inform ourselves, inform other people, and try to find solutions. And I do believe there are many solutions. We don't even have to reinvent the wheel. The solutions have already been put in front of us by the greatest thinkers of the world. We just need to create awareness about what's going on and create awareness about those solutions before they'll be implemented. Because if we don't do it, these kind of people, these sick, toxic people, the worst among us, are going to be the rulers. And what Plato said, if you're not engaged in the political discussion, you will end up being ruled by your inferiors. And that is what's happening. These people are not elite. These people are not enlightened. These people are not healthy. These people are not rational and sane. They're the opposite of that. They just have all the power, money, and influence. So, let's take it back already. You know what I mean? Not by force, but by, this is a psychological, spiritual war on consciousness. It's not about grabbing a gun and going and starting. That's how dumb people react. You have to be smarter than them and learn how to liberate your own mind first. Take care of your own house first. And then maybe we can talk about how you can go out and serve the world in that regard.
Speaking of, you did bring up Canada, and I mean, as I did bring up on your show, not only is knowledge important and seeing the patterns and knowing your history and, having a broad knowledge base, also travel can be good as well. Now, you don't need travel, but in my case, it worked for me. And I kind of caught on. I had another kind of leap in personal evolution in Australia because it's different down there, and also it made me look at Ireland differently when I came back, and I noticed the same patterns of social changes happening in those countries, similar to what's happening in Ireland. What's it like in Canada? What kind of things are you dealing with recently that haven't been there before? What's new about the place?
Well, I mean, I would say that a lot of the things that are happening in Canada are not really that new. It's just that now it seems to be that they're talking more openly about it, and we're actually in the stage of implementation. So the way these things go, if you want to change an entire culture or an entire generation, and you want to convert them into a new way of looking at things in order to, for whatever reason, let's forget about the motives. If you want to do that, you have to go through certain stages. And actually, if you want to learn about this, you can actually look into the way that this has been done in the past to change an entire generation of people from thinking one way into another way. There's a whole science behind it. And what I think would happen in Canada, as is happening in many countries, is it's been a slow sort of boiling the frog effect, where a lot of people were not aware that these changes were being implemented subtly. You don't want to stir the herd too quickly. You don't want to spook the herd. So what you do is you do it slowly, little bit here, take away a freedom there, implement a few thousand laws over there that nobody reads and understands. Change the Common Core educational model that is being enforced across all the school systems. Have the media constantly putting out information that is pinging your subconscious mind and getting you into groupthink patterns and all these kind of things. So it's a slow drip feed. And then before you know it, the current generation would be in a completely different mindset than their parents, their grandparents, and etc. And what I like to do, I very much enjoy it, I've done this since I was young, is speak to people of the older generation. I used to grow up, my grandfather on my dad's side, well, both sides served in World War II. He was a code decipherer for the British Army. And in his later days, he kind of went a little bit nuts and, poor guy, he suffered many strokes and started having flashbacks from the war. And so he got put in a special hospital in Toronto. And, near the end, my grandmother would go and visit this hospital and go and talk to him. And I would kind of hang back. I was just a kid, and I would hang back in the lobby and just hang out with all the elderly people sitting around. And they would talk to me. We'd be playing checkers and stuff. And we would get into pretty deep conversations. And I really enjoyed that. And so I kept that up throughout my years, because I feel like the elderly in our society are just sort of thrown into these homes and they're not cool anymore. They're useless. So just don't talk to them. They got nothing to contribute. Whereas any sane, rational society would respect the elders and go, hey, you lived through so much. What kind of knowledge and wisdom can you share with me? I would like to learn from them, right? So I asked a lot of old generation Canadians, like, what was it like living in, say, the 1950s in Canada or the 1960s, And they talk about how even the middle class in this country they were wealthy in today's standards. There wasn't a huge, poor, poverty-stricken class with homeless people all over the place. Not that it didn't exist, but it wasn't even close to what it is now. And it had a lot to do with something that happened under Pierre Elliott Trudeau in Canada. Okay, so he would be the most seminal figure in Canadian history. He was very popular. He was very charismatic. He was loved by all the top globalists. He was buddies with Mao Zedong. He was a fan of Che Guevara and Castro and all these guys. And he was a card-carrying Marxist, openly supportive of communist ideology, and actually admired the dictatorship in China and wanted to institute some. He looked at Mao Zedong as a genius of our times. He's been quoted many times about this. So Pierre Elliott Trudeau, in 1974, under his watch, he sold out the sovereignty of Canada and went along with the globalist program to essentially take away our Bank of Canada. So the Bank of Canada was our bank. That's how we printed our money. And if we ever printed money and applied any interest to it, that interest would go back into our own reserves, and we would basically be financing our own country. So what he did was sign a bill or approve a bill, someone signed on his behalf, where it sold it to the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland. And if anybody knows about the history of that, just go look it up, go read it. I'll leave you to it. You can see who runs that. It's essentially the origin of the Federal Reserve System in America. It operates the same way. It's a private banking cartel, okay, run by private families that have no allegiance to your country at all. They have allegiance to making money. So they now own and control the right to print our money, and we pay interest to them. We pay compound interest to them as we do it. It's the same as the Federal Reserve, essentially, with maybe a few differences. And when that happened, you can see the change in the economy from more of a free market type economy where, middle class is booming. There's all this opportunity and, there's all this work and it's looking great. And then you see that slowly start to decline. And that at the same time, of course, Trudeau being a major socialist was instituting a lot of social programs, welfare programs, et cetera. And when you talk about this in Canada, people are going to burn me at the stake for having anything against social programs like that, because they're like, we have to take care of the sick and needy and the whole arguments. And they don't realize they've never been shown the truth about how a free market system differs from the system of essentially government control over the means of production operates. And so we didn't see how our debt started climbing higher and higher and higher and higher. And now in Canada, our economy is through the floor. Like if you look at the comparison of our dollar to the US dollar right now, it's absolutely disgusting, And there's a reason for that. And everybody's going to have their reasons, but they don't talk about the origin of where this went wrong. So Trudeau brings in all of these he basically sells us off to the international bankers, brings in all these socialist policies. Starts, the people around him and the different groups around him start creating all these bills and everything to start influencing the culture through the education system and standardized testing and all these things. And this was all rolled out by these globalist think tanks well before Trudeau came in. So he just adopted them and started implementing them. And then prime minister after prime minister comes in. And yeah, they differed on certain things, and whether it was liberal or conservative, maybe some things were done that were really good and some things not. But by and large, they all keep following the same agenda. Now we live in the age of Justin Trudeau, the son of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Okay. And you just see what he's advocating for. He is walking lockstep in with the UN agenda that I just read to you. He is all about the PC progressivism that Kent Clisby was talking about. He's the poster child for it. And to quote him, when he was asked on his run up to becoming the prime minister, he was asked a few questions. One of the questions he was asked was, what's your favorite country outside of Canada, of course? And he said, well, I have to admire China because of its basic dictatorship. This is his words. His basic dictatorship has allowed them to, rein in on these climate change things, and has allowed so many different amazing things to happen in China. And he started speaking really highly about China. And then another thing that he said was, when they asked, what's your plan for Canada? And he goes, well, I see a future that a lot of Canadians can't even imagine. I see Canada as the world's first post-national state.
Uh-oh.
So drop the mic. There you go. You know everything you need to know about the guy. And then you see what he's doing, and just all the cultural appropriation stuff, and then all the scandals. There's been a lot of scandals come out about him. And right now, as we speak, Mehmet, we might lose our prime minister within the next few months, because he's actually under investigation by the RCMP, and they're trying to do a public inquiry to basically criminal charges have been laid against him for trying to interfere in the what was it, like the, oh my God, my brain is dying here. This woman is like a legal counsel representative, okay? And she was going to bring a case against a company called NSC-Lavalin. And this company was involved in all kinds of fraud and overseas like all kinds of crazy criminal stuff. You can go read about it online right now. And the Trudeau administration was trying to coax her out of continuing to press these charges and expose this, because of under the guise of, well, if you pursue this, SNC-Lavalin is so huge in this country, and it is such a huge contributor to our economy, that we're going to lose so many jobs if this company that is super corrupt and is doing deals with like the Muslim Brotherhood, etc. We're going to lose so many jobs as a result of this that we need you to stop pursuing this case. So it was up to 10 meetings where they tried to pressure her into following her conscience, following the Canadian law. She's like, I'm just following the Canadian law. I can't go against the Constitution of Canada, and you're asking me to do that. And so basically that's a very poor oversummary of the situation, but you can go watch all the hearings online, where the Conservative Party is asking for Prime Minister Trudeau to step down, and Canadians of all his approval ratings at like 28%. It's the most horrible approval rating of all time, and that was before this scandal. So he's done. I don't care what happens. I don't care if he somehow weasels his way out of this. His brand is finished completely. And so now Canadians are sitting there going, well, what are we going to do next? And so I think what's going to happen is actually a positive thing, because a lot of people are going to start to get caught up on all the things that went wrong with the Liberal government, and even with past Conservative governments. And we're going to start to really question what's going to happen next. And we have a huge decision that we have to make as a country. We might be parentless. Oh my God, it's like Home Alone. Canada's going to be Home Alone without a parent for a little while as they try to work all of this out and then find out who's going to run the government. But I'll tell you, if they keep going down that track with Trudeau and the behind the scenes deals and the handshakes and the money and all that, if they keep looking down that, I guarantee you they're going to find dirt that will shock the world. And so this is a huge time, actually. I'm very positive about this, because it's important that Canadians are informed about what's happening. Now, you asked about Australia. Australia is, I'd say, one of the top PC progressive countries on the face of the earth that is experimenting with this in a way that is just incredible. Like, I was watching a news report coming out of Australia, like actual mainstream news, where they're seriously talking about banning Thomas the Tank Engine and some of the old cartoons, because they're not gender, what's that word? They're not sensitive to gender bias. They're not. They're promoting, like they're not gender neutral enough, or they're not. So basically, Thomas the Tank Engine is now an evil force in Australian society that is perverting the minds of the young, and so we have to get rid of it because it's not about social justice. And so it's getting wackadoodles over there. And they're also bringing in scores and scores of third world migrants into their country. And so many people are pissed off about it. But again, you can't talk about it because it's not politically correct. And if you're a racist and all this kind of stuff, when nobody really thinks like that about these things, they're just trying to think rationally about it. And of course, when you have an irrational government operating not on the behalf of the people, but on behalf of these UN globalist ideologies, then that means that these people already lost their country. So we already don't have control over our government. Our government is walking in lockstep with these globalists. So then you look at, situation going on in America with Donald Trump, love him or hate him. He's the only one that's up there saying, yeah, screw you. We're not going to be a socialist country. We're not going to follow these UN mandates. We're going to build some borders, make America whatever. And they're like, of course, all the media is going to hate that policy and be like, oh, look at him. He's literally Hitler and blah, 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 blah. And I don't support everything Trump does or whatever, but it's just interesting to see that you even raise your hand to say, yeah, I just think we're going to just focus on our country and do what's best for us. So like, the guy's going to get excommunicated and banished from the face of the earth for this. And, now you have the rise of all these other populist leaders rising up in Europe as a result, because there's a reaction to that policy. So interesting times. I'd have to say it's interesting that you pointed out how what's happening in Ireland and Australia, and I just told you it's all the same here in Canada. Interesting how it all happens simultaneously across different countries, and people want to say there is no central control system. Come on.
Yeah, the patterns are getting really obvious, and it's the same bullshit everywhere. And maybe, the thing about Trudeau and Varadkar as well has drawn some fire here slightly, and there's been different things, not scandals as such, but he's not really on the hook just yet. But the sad thing about the situation is that, these are just front men. It's like George Carlin spoke about it once, I think, on stage when he was talking about, the puppet show, and they just replace one figure with another. And when one of them has been burnt out and used or hits a scandal or whatever, they just stick another mouthpiece in there who'll move the agenda on another step. And like what we were talking about, the key for all this is for people to wake up and see the patterns. And really, it's no coincidence since World War II, they've been drilling it into our heads. Nationalism is bad. Look what the Nazis did, even though they're not really nationalists. They've paved the way for such a long time that nationalism is bad, because with nationalism, that's actually the answer that we need for sovereignty and freedom. That's why, like I said to you and Michael in the interview, I come across as a nationalist, or people would call me right-wing and, Nazi and things like that. But to me, it's like this is just a temporary, strategy that we need right now to protect things. But it's not the be-all and end-all. And I don't like talking about the political dialectic all the time. But when you're dealing with globalism and totalitarianism and communism, that's the rational way to deal with this, is to kind of write enough. And I think that's why maybe Trump got into power and he has some support, is that people have enough of their rights being always put second to another group,
Yeah, no, great point. I mean, because we could look at it and say the nation state is on the fractal. It's really it's a bigger example of the individual in a society. Okay, so we live on a planet. There are many different peoples and cultures and races and ideas, and there's different religious ideas. There's different views on things. How do you get that consensus, that general political will that the UN is talking about, and what are going to be the tenets of that general political will? And when you realize that, no, human beings are different. We've had different histories. We've had different, we have different expressions. I mean, look at nature. Nature is diverse. It's nothing but diversity in nature. I mean, the sparrow is different from the eagle. Does that make the sparrow or the eagle less or greater than?
It's racist,
no, it's just different. It's like our eagles racist Nazis just because the Nazis use them as their banner. And now, oh, look, America uses the eagles, so that must mean they're Nazis too. It's like, no, it's a freaking bird. It has a reason they use that bird. But anyways, you get into nature. There's actually a great clip of Muhammad Ali, one of my favorite boxers, even though he converted to Islam, which is a religion I don't agree with, but I just love him as a person and as a fighter. And he has a great rant on this, where back in the day when you could still have these conversations, he was like, hey, we're all different. I look at, bluebirds fly with bluebirds and blah, 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 blah. And he wasn't trying to say we shouldn't have cultures working together or having people come together, or you shouldn't have friends of people with different groups. That's not what people are talking about. When you're talking about nationalism or globalism, we're talking about the organization of society and who has the power and who doesn't. Like, how are we going to manage our society? The further away that the powers are from the individual, the more tyrannical it is, because the individual gets lost in that mix. Think of a multinational corporation. Think of the corporations that run your frickin' internet. Go call them and get a hold of the people responsible for screwing up your bill or overcharging you or, whatever it is, and try to get anything done. No, you call them up. We're talking to computers. You got to press 17 numbers in order to get a human resources guy that works in India and is reading a script to you. And you don't get to talk to anybody that can actually resolve your issue. Think about a government that operates like that. It already operates like that, but at least you still can write to your local congressman or parliamentary, whatever, and you can have them go in and, you can try to persuade them so that they can fight for you in the federal government level and all that. At least you have that, which we could dissect where the flaws are in that as well, but at least we have it. That's going to get taken away, and now the power is going to be so far removed from you that all of your choice is gone. That's not freedom. And they don't want freedom. They are demonizing freedom right now. They're like, the freedom experiment failed. America's evil. And so we're going to blow it up and create something where actually we show you that freedom is not the way. It's following lockstep. It's the Borg. The Borg is the way, and you will assimilate, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so people like us that are just like, hold on a second here. What are we signing? Like, did you ever go and get a mortgage at a bank or try to get a loan? And did you ever read the fine print of how much you're going to pay back? Way more than that loan by the time you're done. Did you know that? You should have informed consent. So you read the fine print. People like you and me, Emmett, we're just reading the fine print and we're asking questions. And stop me when I'm wrong. Show me that I'm wrong. The onus is not on me to prove this. The onus is on these people to prove their argument. And sorry, but the historical record does not reflect very well on the policies that you're trying to implement on a global level. In fact, 100% of the time in history that the policies that I read to you and that you can read for yourself that they're trying to implement on a global level have been used, it has been a 100% failure. And this is why they don't want you talking about Venezuela. This is why you can't talk about it. This is why it's like, oh no, because that's a modern example that's right there to show you that these policies are absolutely horrendous and that we need to understand that, okay, fine, the Nazis were National Socialists, okay? Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez are democratic socialists. What's the difference? One is a picture of ponies and rainbows around it that sounds better, but it's the same picture as the one that's got a boot stamping on the face of the people that they're being ruled by. So it's just a matter of they change their marketing, they change their terms, but it's the same principles. How can those? It's math. 1 + 1 = 2. They're trying to say 1 + 1 = 3. And you're like, no, I think 1 + 1 = 2. Nazi. Nationalist, evil. You must hate everybody. What? Where did you get that? What kind of math is that? It's horrible math. I love other people. You know who I respect? I've studied a lot of Japanese martial arts. I respect the Japanese. Okay. You could say, oh, Japanese are super racist. Okay, fine. You know what? When you go to Japan, you're going to go to see a whole different culture, a whole different way of doing things, a very rich history. And yeah, a lot of dark, twisted shit in their history too, just like everybody. But you know what they're not doing? They're not bringing in all kinds of third world migrants to come in and completely destroy their culture because they want their culture to remain as it is. They're a very nationalistic country. You see anybody talk about how the Japanese are Nazis? And yeah, we fought them in World War II and there was a whole thing behind that. But I mean, think about it like people aren't using them as an example. It's only Western European countries. Sweden, you can't love your culture and your history because it's all about racism, slavery, evil, blah, 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 blah. Guilt. So here we go. You guys got to take in all these people and you got to take care of them. We don't know how. We don't have a plan. We don't have a financial plan. But yeah, probably everybody's going to suffer as a result, but you still got to do it because of whatever reasons. And on we could go. And you say, there's actually a great book I'm reading right now. It's called The Virtue of Nationalism. Okay. And that just me saying that, people are going to be like, what? It must be Nazi. It's written by a Jewish scholar. All right. And he's talking about how, and then you're going to, it's the Jewish Zionist conspiracy. It's like, okay, hold your phone there. Okay. Just think about it. That's like saying all white people that favor nationalism or having their own country are Nazis. That's like saying, well, all Jews are in on some global Zionist conspiracy to control the world. That's ridiculous. So let's put that aside. This guy wrote this book to show you the facts about when you think about freedom, when you think about prosperity, when you think about wealth in a country and how to generate it. Here's the case for nationalism that you're not being told. Okay. And I agree with you, Emmett. Nationalism is just a first step. in my opinion, and all it is bringing it back to the values we used to have, that our parents had, that our grandparents had. We've been changed into globalists by all this propaganda. So it's about going back and saying, hey, maybe they had a point on certain things. Maybe there's a reason that we set up national boundaries, in the same way that, I don't know, maybe you have a home with doors on it and locks on your doors, and you put an alarm system in your car, and you don't allow homeless people to move into your house, and you're not asking for all these migrants to come in and move in with you and your children, right? So do you understand that when you bring it all down, it's the same argument. If you're going to have walls around your home and locks on your door, you are coming from the same perspective I am when it comes to protecting your country and protecting your values. So if you want open borders, go live in a tent in a field, give all your possessions away to every bum and beggar that comes up to try to take it from you, and see how that works out for you and for them. So we live in a world where you have to protect yourself. This is what it is. Like, as martial arts, what am I teaching you? I'm teaching you how to have borders around you, because of the fact that we don't live in a kumbaya frickin' world, man. Sorry, I wish we did. We don't. Human beings are different. We're tribal by nature. We compete against each other by nature. If you try to lobotomize everybody and change their DNA and change their brain and change their nature, you're turning human beings into something completely different. And that is what is going to be required for them to implement these policies. Just so you know, these policies will fall on their face if implemented on current human beings. They have to change you. And this brings in that whole discussion about the transhumanist stuff, the AI, the nanotechnology, all these different freaky technologies that are being rolled out. Because if you go back to reading some of the Dr. Richard Days and Jose Delgados and some of the Bernays and how they were actually working on how to change the human being on a genetic level so that they could be the new nodes in this globalist future. It's sick, and you're being lied to, and nobody told you about it. And so you're not informed. So you're just going along with a program that you think sounds about it. Oh, we're just going to create this united world and everybody's going to get along. And we just mix everybody together and it's going to be great. And you go, okay, but think it through, do some math, look at history, look at the facts, and let's try to build something that works. And then from there, improve it. Let's not just blow the whole thing up and lose civilization in the process, you know?
Yeah, exactly, man. There's so much to say on it, and we ran over, though. We've gone on for quite a while, which is great. It's been epic.
Time flies when you're having fun, eh? Sorry.
Exactly, and it's all relative stuff, and what we have to do is just keep doing our work, of course. And that naivete thing is a big part of it. We should do another one, of course, at another stage and build on what we've talked about. But we're in a free will planet, and you can't force people to wake up. You just got to, rattle as many cages as you can, or put the information out there, let them make the decisions with their own free will. And, for the viewers, you have to definitely check out unslaved.com, because that website is very it's very informative, and it'll give you that broad knowledge base for what we're talking about. If you care and you want to make a difference and contribute and wake people up and all of that, the key is knowledge and persistence, and that's website is a really good place to start. So David, anyway, it's been fantastic hearing your thoughts about things. And of course, we could go on forever. There's so much to cover, but we should do another one. But anyway, I'll probably be on Enslaved again at some stage and kind of analyze some more issues.
Yes, absolutely. And I really appreciate you bringing me on. I recommend people don't believe me or listen to me. I'm just one person. I believe that you should go and research this for yourself. I'm an advocate for free will, just like you are, Emmett. And one final statement on that. That is also another argument that is being had again, the age-old philosophical debate of free will versus determinism. I don't think it's any coincidence that in this age, they're trying to convince everybody that they don't have any free will, that you're already an automaton robot. So start acting like it and stop believing that you have free will, because you don't. And so we discussed that in great length on the Unslaved podcast as well, to advocate for the fact that, yeah, there are things that you can't control. There are probably things that are determined, but there are elements of your consciousness that you do have free will over. I believe you have a volitional consciousness, and I believe that you have a free right to choose. And that was the principle upon which all of the best parts of Western civilization were based. That is the argument that underpins the idea of freedom. And so we need to understand that as well. So if you want to come over and check it out, unslaved.com. Keep supporting Emmett here as well, and also other alternative media. These are tough times to do this kind of work and have these conversations. We put a lot on the line by putting our faces and our names to this kind of information. And so it's important that in this wake of all this censorship and people being demonetized, that you support people that are doing this work in any way that you can. So I encourage you to support alternative media. I'm so grateful to be doing this work and for the support that we already have, and also to be able to come on your awesome podcast, Emmett. I'm a huge fan of you. I listen to your stuff all the time, and keep doing the great work that you're doing and helping to unlock minds.
Great. Thanks, David. David Whitehead of Unslaved.com. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching Resolving Reality. That was my conversation with David Whitehead, the co-creator and co-host of the excellent Unslaved podcast. To see David in action with his co-host Michael Desarian, visit their website, unslaved.com. But before you do that, subscribe to Resolving Reality, share this video, and check out our website, resolvingreality.com. So again, thanks for watching. Until next time, and enjoy Resolving Reality.